Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today for an afternoon of birdsong at the piano. My name is Anna Showalter, and I'm delighted to share with you a program that celebrates the beauty and wonder of birdsong and acknowledges the strong affections that we humans have for our avian kindred. Our ears, our sense of hearing, and our ability to make sound are powerful tools that can connect us to each other, both within species and also across species. Rachel Carson wrote in 1962 about massive bird population losses due to toxic chemical application. It was the ear that first sensed the absence of the birds. It was a silent spring. Today, with bird populations in decline, it is time to again engage our ears. This afternoon, we will use musical listening as an entry point to tune into the choruses of songsters who live in our neighborhoods, parks, and forests. In the 4 pieces on the program today, we will encounter 4 different bird communities, 4 different approaches to transcribing birdsong for the piano, and 4 different experiences of hearing birdsong at the piano. One of the bird musicians most beloved for its song in North America is the hermit thrush. In Transcendentalist America, the hermit thrush was a frequent subject of poetry, often pitted against the European nightingale in a sort of contest for which continent could boast the most sublime of birdsong. This poem by John Clare reads, "I heard from morn to morn a merry thrush sing hymns of rapture while I drank the sound with joy." Composer Amy Beach used this poem as the epigraph for her 1921 composition, A Hermit Thrush at Morn. Unlike previous composers who wrote highly stylized representations of a generic, often symbolic bird in their music, Beach intentionally transcribed the song of a specific hermit thrush at a specific time and location. As Beach settled into her summer residency at the MacDowell Colony in 1921, the quiet of the New Hampshire woods soon gave way to an intriguing sound. She was compelled to drop her work and turn her attention to what she later described as a most voluble thrush. Like a stenographer taking down a dictation, Beach sat with pen and paper, eagerly transcribing what she heard, revising and correcting herself as she went. Luckily, she had absolute pitch, so that helped a lot. When she was done, Amy Beach played her transcriptions back to the bird, and she reports that the thrush answered her. It was important to Amy Beach that anyone who plays a hermit thrush at morn would understand the intentionality behind her transcription. She included a citation of sorts in the score, acknowledging the hermit thrush for their contribution. The performer's note says, "These bird calls are exact notations of hermit thrush songs in the original keys, but at a lower octave, obtained at the MacDowell Colony, Peterborough, New Hampshire." Amy Beach was not alone in her interest in birdsong transcription in the early 20th century. Several sound-based field guides to North American birds appeared during this time. These field guides included representation of each bird's song in musical notation. One of the most popular of these field guides was Field Book of Wild Birds and Their Music by F. Schuyler Matthews, first published in 1904 and updated in 1921, the same year Amy Beach wrote her hermit thrush pieces. In this second edition, Matthews discusses the hermit thrush extensively, and he makes the claim that hermit thrushes sing in pentatonic scales. The idea that hermit thrushes sing in pentatonic scales became widespread and was even picked up by an ornithology paper in 1951. However, more recently, scholars have offered a more plausible theory about hermit thrush song pitch content. An interdisciplinary group of researchers, including musician Emily Doolittle and her colleagues in cognitive biology, have shown that hermit thrush pitch selection converges with the overtone series. This makes sense given that the pentatonic scale is a human construct, whereas the overtone series is a natural phenomenon. What is remarkable about Amy Beach's hermit thrush transcriptions in 1921 is that they do indeed converge with the overtone series. Let's listen to Matthews and Beach's hermit thrush song transcriptions. Matthews uses the pentatonic scale. Amy Beach's transcriptions are based on the overtone series using a fundamental of A, second partial, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. Amy Beach's hermit thrush transcriptions are remarkable because she was using the overtone series, whereas her contemporaries were assuming that the hermit thrush sings in the pentatonic scale. And I believe that this shows that the care and the intention that she brought to her musical encounters with the hermit thrush. A discussion of birdsong and music would be incomplete without considering the great French 20th century composer and amateur ornithologist, Olivier Messiaen. Messiaen used birdsong extensively in his musical compositions over the course of his long career. He also wrote about his thoughts on birdsong. He often quoted his teacher Paul Dukas, who told him, "Listen to the birds, they are the great masters." Messiaen's Catholic mysticism infused all his music, and birdsong was no exception. For Messiaen, birds are characters within a spiritual drama, rather than an ecological drama. Birdsong for Messiaen was a proclamation of the resurrection to come, an eternal refrain that exists outside human time. But for all that symbolic language, Messiaen really did spend his time out in nature, listening to and learning from real, live, earthly birds. He considered himself the first musical ornithologist and prized himself on his transcriptions. In one anecdote, Messiaen's wife, the renowned concert pianist Yvonne Loriot, recognized a curlew call in the wild, even though she had only ever heard Messiaen's transcription. Yet for all the attention placed on Messiaen's birdsong transcriptions, their accuracy, or lack thereof, is probably not the most interesting thing about them. Hollis Taylor, who we will hear more about later, has shown that Messiaen took an artistic rather than a documentary interest in birdsong. Whereas some composers try to record birdsong as comprehensively as possible, Messiaen allowed his artistic impulse to influence even his initial transcriptions. Even as he sat in the field or beside his record player, he selected and notated only the aspects of the birdsong that appealed to his compositional goals. How then does birdsong function in Messiaen's work? Les Courlis, cendré is the 13th and final movement of Messiaen's piano cycle Catalogue d'oiseaux, or the Catalogue of Birds. Messiaen's Catalogue of Birds places birds in a landscape among communities of other birds, and sometimes other animals in that landscape. Les Courlis cendré is set on the island of Ushant off the coast of Brittany. At the beginning of each of the pieces in Catalogue d'oiseaux, Messiaen uses a descriptive paragraph at the beginning of each score, which sets the stage for the landscape, the avian characters, and the narrative setting of the piece. In Les Courlis cendré, Messiaen begins his description with an introduction to the curlew. On the headland of Pern, one can see a large bird with streaked plumage, russet markings, a gray-brown bird standing upright with a long beak curved like a sickle. The curlew. In the case of the curlew, I was able to find the actual recording that Messiaen used to make his curlew transcription. Now, Messiaen made his transcriptions both from live birds during his excursions in nature, but also sometimes from recordings, especially if the bird wasn't easy to find near where he lived in Paris. In the case of the curlew, Messiaen did use a 1937 recording from an album by an early nature recordist named Ludwig Koch. Messiaen describes the curlew call as having sad, slow tremolos, chromatic accents, wild trills, and a mournful, repeated glissando, which expresses all the desolation of the seashore. Let's listen to 3 segments of the curlew call, followed by Messiaen's transcription. It is interesting to notice that Messiaen uses a two-handed texture in his transcriptions. Some of them include 3 to 4 voices. Messiaen is the only composer on the program to use a multi-voice texture in his transcription, and this is his way of evoking color. The curlew is not the only bird featured in Les Courlis cendré. There is a chorus of other seabirds featured as well. And I'll play several of these for you, along with a recording of the original bird. I was not able to find a recording that can be traced to Messiaen's transcription process, but I have matched them with a modern recording as best I could. Messiaen describes these birds as circling around the shoreline while being lashed by the noise of the waves. The black-headed gull, Messiaen describes as cruel. the herring gull with a rhythmic horn call. The oyster catcher with piping trills. The turnstone with fast repeated notes. After describing all these birds in his program note, Messiaen returns to the narrative unfolding in the landscape. He writes, "The water extends as far as the eye can see. Little by little, fog and night spread over the sea. All is dark and dreadful. From amidst the jagged rocks, the lighthouse of Creech sends out a dismal boom." It is significant to note that this is the only time in the entire catalog of birds that Messiaen represents a human-made sound. What is the significance of this anthropogenic noise? A warning of imminent danger in the context of the lament of the curlew and the desolation of the seascape. The dreadful landscape, the churning of waves, the warning siren of the lighthouse, the lament of the curlew, and the agitation, almost angry sound of some of the other birds brings to my mind a journal entry from Kurt Cobain from the band Nirvana. He said, "Birds scream at the top of their lungs in horrified, hellish rage every morning at daybreak to warn us all of the truth. But sadly, we don't speak bird." What is the lament of the curlew in this piece? What is the warning of the siren? What is the truth that we do not yet have ears to hear? Hollis Taylor is a musician and researcher living in Australia who calls herself a zoomusicologist. She defines zoomusicology as the study of music in animal culture. Her field research focuses on the pied butcherbird, who are virtuosic songbirds living in the Australian outback. When Taylor first encountered the pied butcherbird, she said, "The musician in me recognizes the musician in them." Taylor's research shows how pied butcherbirds intelligently and creatively construct their song out of phrase types which are unique to each individual and develop over the course of a lifespan. These birds also develop their phrases over the course of a song by varying them and combining them in complex ways. Taylor has also identified traits in pied butcherbirds that are often associated as only human behaviors. For instance, pied butcherbirds seem to have the capacity for octave equivalence. Pied butcherbirds sing in solos, duets, and ensembles, and even hold formal singing lessons for their young. Hollis Taylor uses the term recomposition because her goal is not to improve on birdsong, but rather to commend and showcase birdsong to new listeners. In Owen Springs Reserve 2014, Hollis Taylor and her partner John Rose have taken a field recording of a pied butcherbird, recorded by Taylor, and created a piano part to respond and interact with it. When she transcribes birdsong, Taylor clearly delineates between the process of data collection and composition. Data collection being recording the pitch, rhythm, and timbre, pacing, and syntax of a song as transparently as possible within a notational system. Composition being the process of crafting the transcriptions into a musical performance for a human audience. In my analysis of Owen Springs Reserve, I have identified several phrases and motives that repeat and develop throughout. We'll hear the bird singing phrase A, followed by the piano. Phrase C. And a hybrid form of phrases A and C. Owen Springs Reserve 2014 can be heard in a version for vibraphone on Hollis Taylor's album Absolute Bird. But today is the very first time that this new piano version will be heard in performance. The newest piece on the program today is a piece I commissioned last year in partnership with the Virginia Commission for the Arts and several JMU offices, including the Arboretum, the Biology Department, and the Office of Creative Propulsion. I partnered with composer Ashkan Tabatabaie, who was teaching here at the JMU School of Music at the time. Visual artist Audrey Lund worked with us as well to create a video to accompany the music. Our goal was to create a musical performance based on the research of JMU ornithology professor Dana Mosley. This project is an example of a newer approach to music and science, that is, data sonification. And our goal in the composition was to represent data from Mosley's research through sound. Dana Mosley's research is an ideal candidate for data sonification because she studies sound as well. She studies the impact of urban soundscapes on the song of the gray catbird. After immersing ourselves in gray catbird research coming out of the Mosley lab, Tabatabaie and I selected a thread of this research that we felt we could bring out in a musical performance. To put it simply, gray catbirds learn to sing differently in rural environments compared to urban environments. One reason for this is that urban noise masks the lower frequency of catbird song, forcing the birds to adapt their vocalization in order to be heard. The second reason is that different bird species and fewer bird species are available for catbirds to mimic in cities as compared to forests. Mosley and her team are working to understand these adaptations and to learn what, if any, impact these adaptations have on catbird communities and their ecosystems. This piece is organized into 3 sections based on 3 of the field recording sites that Dr. Mosley uses across the rural to urban gradient. The rural one is the George Washington National Forest. The middle one is the JMU EJC Arboretum. And the urban one is the National Mall in Washington, D.C. In each of these 3 locations, you will hear a recording of the soundscape that comes from that site. You will notice that these soundscapes are dramatically different in each site. If you are someone who knows your birds well by ear, you will be able to notice that different bird communities are present in each of the soundscapes. But even if you don't know your birds very well, you will definitely hear differences in the amount of urban noise present at each location. While we are at each of the locations, you will hear the piano posing as the gray catbird. The piano will sing a mimicry song that reflects the bird communities present at that location. Here's a couple things you can listen for. How does the piano, representing the catbird, adapt to the 3 different soundscapes? Is the catbird masked by any of the soundscapes? Does the catbird the piano raise its frequency level to try to be heard? Do you think it's successful in its adaptation? Another thing to listen for is, can you hear how the piano is mimicking the bird communities in each location? Is the piano music more varied in one location compared to another? In this piece, Tabatabaie has transcribed Catbird's song for the piano. Tabatabaie has used technology to help him generate transcriptions which are extremely specific or even granular with regard to pitch content, of course, within the constraints of a fixed pitch instrument. Since the goal of this composition was data sonification, he has allowed the transcriptions to stand as they are for the most part. So in some ways, you can think of this piece like a game of telephone. And it all starts with a cardinal, for instance. So somewhere out in the world, a cardinal sings, a gray catbird hears this, learns it, and adds cardinal song to its cycle, its repertoire that it can cycle through. And then at some point, this catbird, mimicking a cardinal, was recorded by Dana Mosley, or one of her students. And Ashkan has used that recording to make his transcription in musical notation for me to play on the piano. So today you will hear a piano mimicking a catbird, mimicking a cardinal, and a bunch of other birds. I'll play 5 of those transcriptions for you now. This is the original cardinal, catbird mimicking the cardinal, goldfinch, catbird, Carolina wren, catbird, robin, catbird, tufted titmouse, We will now move into the performance portion of today's lecture recital. I hope that you enjoy the creative efforts of the composers who crafted this music into a medium that I can share with you on the piano today. I also hope that you enjoy the glimpses you will get of the bird musicians whose songs are presented in this recital. And most of all, I hope that you will take your listening ears with you out of the recital hall this afternoon, and that you would listen to the birds wherever you encounter them. Thank you.
you.